So, I watched the US presidential debate and I've lost my hope for this country. What's the point of anything if the world's gonna burn down like hell? Let's get this over with. So we're back with some more listening multiple choice questions. It's one of those things that just don't allow for techniques to shine as brightly as they would have with other questions. So let's just jump in. Hell, if agencies can skip through the majority of it, why can't I do that as well? Just to save a bit of time for all of us. So let's quickly go through the housekeeping bit. You listen to stuff and you pick the corresponding options depending on the prompt. If it's a choose multiple answers, you have at least 2 correct options, but any wrong option will deduct your earned points. Understood? Let's get to the first question of today. Anytime you see such a long prompt, I suggest that you give it a good read before the audio begins to play. It's important because it's probably asking for something specific, so that you can be picky with what info to pay attention to. Here we go.
When you think about what characterizes a good assessment task, the question you really need to ask yourself is, what characterizes good teaching? Good teaching should enable students to show just what they're capable of. In so doing, it must be motivating, interesting to the students, and it should be inclusive to all. Equally, a good assessment needs to be clear and unambiguous, and as interesting as possible, for the range of people for whom the task is designed. It needs also to be inclusive. Well, here I mean so that the test takers are able to give a good representation of their true ability. Use this question to keep going back to it, to keep, checking that the questions you're asking actually make sense and mean something to you and to the students themselves.
Oh, what a classic listening question by Pearson. It's truly infeasible to just randomly guess the correct answer. Why? Because every option, be it individual words or phrasing, is mentioned somewhere in the passage. You just can't simply rely on familiarity to guarantee a high probability. The question asks for the most important aspect of a good assessment, so you have to find a way to distinguish the one from everything else. Here comes my notes for this audio. Firstly, the speaker mentioned the idea of a good assessment, and she proposed a question for teachers to ask themselves. What characterizes good teaching? This is a strong clue which suggests that you should be looking for whatever that constitutes good teaching. Right afterwards, she mentions how good teaching should let students show what they can really do. In other words, to show their true capabilities. That's probably something you should prioritize should you see it in the options. In fact, the B is definitely a correct option that you should pick. After this, she mentioned everything you can see in the other options. A good assessment should mean something to the teachers as well. It should be interesting, fair, and unambiguous. And there she went again, it needs to be a good representation of the student's true ability. A lot of stuff indeed, but it's important for you to see that everything else is merely expanding on the one important point. That is, good assessment should reflect what the students can do. I don't really have much to comment on these options except for the first one. As a teacher myself, I feel like it would be quite narcissistic to pick option A. How are the tests that are meant for students actually about the teachers? It is understandable if you end up picking options C or D, but A is really a big no-no. This is quite a tricky question that might cause some trouble, but just as the agencies will say, multiple choice questions suck because they're worth very little, so don't stress yourself out too much, okay? I mean, I don't really agree with their claims, but I do agree that you should allow yourself some room for mistakes. Don't beat yourself up, that's my job. Let's take a quick look at the transcript if you want to double check on your listening comprehension, and it's time for the second question. This question is, once again, asking for something very specific. This is one of those rare situations that numbers actually do matter. Well, the exact values still don't matter as much. If you can tell big from small, then you're still fine. Anyway, you're looking for the length of time, and based on the options, you're probably looking at different sections of a test. What an ingenious question. A question in the test about questions in the test. Here's the passage.
The exam, which is next Friday, is made up of 4 sections, which I think I've mentioned a couple of times already in this course. Okay, so there are 20 multiple choice questions, 10 short answer questions, an extended response task, you choose one topic from 4 possibilities, and finally a practical task. For each of the first 3 sections, I'm allocating 60 minutes. You then hand in your paper, move to the lab and begin the practical task. I'm allowing a 10-minute break before you start getting underway with the practical task. I've allocated just 30 minutes to this.
You see, even for a question like this, numbers still suck. Sure, you should pick up the allocated timelines for each section, but do you really care there will be 10 or 20 questions for whichever section? I don't. Here are the notes. You have 60 minutes for each of the 3 sections and 30 minutes for the last one. Wait, which one is the last one? Also, I remember hearing about something that lasts 10 minutes. Ooh, this is a dilemma. Of course, I'm exaggerating a little. I'm sure most of you should be able to pick up that the practical only lasts for half an hour, unlike everything else, and there will be a 10-minute break before the practical after you're done with the other parts. I'm doing this to remind you that the actual values don't matter. You really should focus a lot more on the things and how they correlate with each other. It's an easy question overall. Let's dial it up a bit with the next one, shall we? This question is about skyscrapers and its building materials. This is a good example to show that if you enjoy or have learned about the nerdy stuff, you actually don't have to listen to the passage. I immediately picked out the options because some of them literally made no sense to me. Have I mentioned before that I'm a certified engineer? And yet here I am making YouTube videos trying to educate and entertain at the same time. Whatever, let's listen to the audio.
In today's session, I'd like to start out with a brief overview of developments since the birth of the skyscraper. Builders and engineers have continuously looked for ways to improve building methods and materials in order to make structures, these new structures, stronger, taller and lighter. Skyscrapers are and must be built to last, so they must be made of materials that are strong, durable, resistant to the sun, wind, rain, frost and snow, and affordable. Concrete is one of the most common materials beyond the steel supports because it's enormously versatile. Its composition can be changed depending on the needs of the building. It can be reinforced, making it stiffer. What I mean is stronger by setting steel mesh or bars into the concrete. And additives can make it set or harden faster or slower depending on the needs of the design. And this will be a key concern that you guys will ultimately spend a lot of time in your careers thinking about, really grappling with this idea. Another very important material is glass, an important material in all this because the steel skeleton now supports the main loads of the building. The outer skin only serves to keep the weather out and let light in. The more light, the better. So glass walls became very popular beginning after World War II because they are weatherproof while providing ample natural light, and also because they are so much lighter and cheaper than masonry or concrete.
Oh, by the way, have I mentioned that you're looking for the quote-unquote wrong options? Yeah, be careful with these ones because if you miss the not in the prompt, then you're probably going to pick the exact opposite of what you have understood from the speaker. I'll also refrain myself from referring to the options as right or wrong. Rather, I'll say pick or don't pick to avoid confusion. Here comes the notes. At the beginning, the speaker mentioned building techniques, but he actually lied. He only talked about the materials, which is kind of a disappointment for me. I was hoping that my nerdy knowledge can shine through more, but now I only get to talk about materials. Yes, everything in the passage is about materials. The speaker listed a bunch of criteria that the materials have to meet, namely strong, light, cheap, waterproof, and so on. He then spent most of his time on concrete, which he described as versatile and can adapt to change depending on the situation. The second material he talked about was glass, which is used to build the exterior wall to let light in and block weather out. The steel frame was mentioned sparingly throughout the passage, illustrating its importance as the stuff actually carrying all the weight. Good stuff. Let's look at the options. You know what, let's completely ignore the notes we just talked about and just decide using your common sense. Option A makes sense. Glass is light, cheap, and transparent, so we leave it out. Option B, on the other hand, is complete nonsense, which ironically is what we need to pick here. You can certainly change things up with concrete because it's a very versatile material. Option C is disgustingly sensible. Steel carries the weight, so we don't pick option C. As for option D, it is technically correct, but the prompt wants us to find something false, so we don't pick it. Glass is ideal as the external wall to block out the heat, the cold, the rain, the tornadoes, the tsunamis, Godzilla. Yeah, maybe not the last three, but you get the point. It's also much lighter than masonry, which is just a fancy way of saying building with stone. On the other hand, option E is definitely irrational. Glass can't bear much weight. It can barely handle the weight of Cinderella. Option F is not something we would want to pick because it makes a lot of sense. See, PTE is a lot easier if you actually pay attention during lectures for your college electives. You pick options B and E, and this is a choose multiple answers. Here comes the transcript. Shall we do another one? I think we shall. Here it comes. Have I told you guys before that I'm a certified engineer? The question is, once again, something you can answer without ever listening to the audio if you have undergone similar training as I did. Nevertheless, I think most of you should have heard of a catalytic converter before. Long story short, it's a device placed in your car, and CATCON is its abbreviation. It will surely confuse some of you without some background info, so you're welcome. Take it away, stranger.
Let's talk for a moment about the job of the catalytic converters. In a nutshell, their job is to convert harmful pollutants into less harmful pollutants, emissions, before they ever leave the car's exhaust system. They are still most commonly used in motor vehicle exhaust systems, but you'll also find them on generator sets, forklifts, mining equipment, trucks, buses, trains, and other engine-equipped machines. A catalytic converter provides an environment for a chemical reaction where toxic combustion byproducts are converted to less toxic substances. CATCONs are now fitted to both petrol and diesel engines, and I must say they do a good job, as long as they are clean and not clogged up with carbon and other deposits from the engine.
Let's take a look at my notes. We have this thing called a catalytic converter, and it cleans up the pollutants before it leaves the car. It's an extremely common device in almost all motor vehicles, and the speaker gave a bunch of examples along with regular cars. Chemical reactions occur within the CATCON so that harmful stuff can be converted into less toxic substances. Catalytic converters are used with both gasoline engines and diesel engines. The speaker said petrol, I say gasoline. Only one expression is correct. I'll give you a hint. USA #1! USA #1! Lastly, the speaker said they are quite effective, so long as they don't get clogged up. This is the only important bit here, and by that I mean we don't really care about what clogs up the CATCON. The simple fact that it can be clogged is enough to answer the question. PTE questions rarely dive too deep into the topics, and this is a prime example. A little extra discussion before we move on to the options. The very first thing you will learn about a catalytic converter is the fact that you have catalysts inside the device. However, even though that's literally half of the name, the speaker never bothered to explain what a catalyst is, and I don't think you would know what it is unless you actually took or paid attention during high school chemistry class, which I highly doubt. Once again, this goes to show that scary words don't matter. What matters a lot more is the message that the speaker wants to get across. When you read the transcript, substitute every catalytic converter or CATCON with stuff, and the message itself will become much clearer if you had difficulty understanding the passage. Looking at option A, my common sense screams false, but if you feel the need to validate my intuition, both diesel and gasoline engines are equipped with a catalytic converter, so it's wrong, both factually and, more importantly, emotionally. Option B is correct. The only thing it changed from the original passage was the phrasing, and the message is still the same. If it's clean and not clogged, the device will function well. Option C is complete garbage. The device is most commonly seen in automobiles, basically anything with an engine. It is indeed found in mining equipment, but certainly more so in trucks and buses. Option D is correct for obvious reasons. This is the perfect example that if you know anything about a catalytic converter, you just go straight ahead and pick it. Option E is probably the trickiest among them all. The first part of it is actually correct, but what's incorrect is the second half. What the hell is a toxic combustion? As explained by the speaker and by me, the burning doesn't happen in the CATCON. Anyone with any working knowledge of how a car works should know that stuff is burned in the engine, and the catalytic converter simply cleans up the toxic air afterwards. This is a choose multiple answers, and you should be picking options B and D. There you have it, some nice and easy listening multiple choice questions to get it out of the way. It surely takes time to practice and improve, but it's certainly the ones that allow for the least techniques and strategies. Therefore, you certainly should devote more time and energy to other question types. That's not saying these multiple choice questions don't matter at all, they just don't matter as much. Please like, subscribe, and share if this has been helpful, and feel free to post any questions in the comment section below. Let's not fail to shut up when it's someone else's turn to talk, and I'll see you all next time.